Adam,
Rob,
it's great to be with you.
it's great to be with you.
It's on your
It
mind.
sounded very church-like, and also with
We're
you.
a couple of church guys. May the force be with you, and also with you.
You know, I was so struck as you were coming over to sit down for this chat by, I mean, it's going to sound corny, but the pep in your step and how cheerful you are in general. And I thought about that as you were coming over. I said, wow, this is someone who brings life to just about everything I've seen you do, at least.
Thanks.
And I'm wondering if you might be able to say a little bit about where that comes from and how that is energized maybe by the Goose.
Yeah. Well, for sure, it's great to be at the Wild Goose, and you can come here with pep or no pep, and you'll often get what you need. Isn't that great about the Goose? Appreciate the kind words. For me, I often try to remind myself that it's really nothing I've done. I don't mean a big grace thing. I just mean I was born this way. Born this way, and sometimes I have to kind of moderate it because pep is not always what's needed. Energy isn't always what's needed, but part of that comes from just that. I think the second big thing it comes from is I'm obsessed with connecting with people and making connections, and maybe that's a brain thing. Maybe it's nature versus nurture debate all over again as to where that comes from. But I found that's a good way to serve people, to connect up with them. Plus, when you see a friend you pep in your step. If you see a stranger or danger, your pep may have less step. But and the Wild Goose is, I find it's nourishing because, in general, I don't really have an agenda when I'm at the Wild Goose. My agenda is letting the goose wash over me, and being uncomfortable occasionally and disagreeing with things, but generally letting that wash over. So, I mean, what's more energizing than being in a place where you're not expecting to be harmed, but you're expecting to be challenged? So.
Sweet. Do you love what you do? And if you might tell us a little bit more about what you do specifically outside of the Goose.
Yeah. My day job is making sure that 55 Sojourners, staff members, and fellows are well supported in their work, are funded for their work, know what they're doing at Sojourners, which is articulating the biblical call to social justice and inspiring hope and action in the church and the world. So the day job is really looking at the world's toughest ills, reading it through the lens of Scripture, and then prayerfully deciding what can we do. And we only do 5 things. We don't do everything. People say, oh, Sojourners feeding hungry mouths. I mean, maybe in our personal volunteer time, but not at Sojourners per se. We do messaging, get the right messaging, right? Messaging media, getting out in the media, mobilizing, you know what that is. And then advocacy on certain subjects, and then convening, making sure that people and leaders don't feel alone, but feel connected and conjoined and focused on what they do. So that's the day job, and nothing to me is more exciting than connecting up people and ideas with resources to move movements forward. So it's a beautiful thing.
Cool. This morning, we heard from William Barber, Reverend William Barber, Reverend Dr. William Barber.
Yes.
In all of his passion, honestly. And I'm always struck every time I hear him live how much it is a call to action. It's not static. It is not someone berating you. It's not someone just giving you stuff. It's actually an invitation to be part of a movement. And I'm wondering, in your role at Sojourners, in your role here on the board at Wild Goose, how do you see this working into that call, those kinds of calls? Because you mentioned social ills, and I wonder how you see that manifesting. And also, I'm wondering what, if any, is the social ill that you think sits at the top of the list?
It's beautiful. Well, I took my kids. We went to be with Dr. William Barber last night in downtown Asheville. He was calling us to action, as you noted, for children in cages and the humanity of every person, the stranger, gur, which appears in the Bible 92 times or so. So he was calling that action last night. I see the call to action is something you want to obviously comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. I think for the most part we're trying to afflict the comfortable, including myself, and charging up for action. Let us know it's not alone, to change the dialogue, to reframe the conversation. Dr. Barber does that really so well. So he inserts action into our daily walk. None of us can really few of us can drop our J jobs and just go be a full-time activist. But what we can do, we must do. And Dr. Barber, I think, calls us to do what you can do. You must not do everything. You cannot do everything. What were you able to do? Were you able to talk to your representative? Were you able to open your home for a sanctuary person? Were you able to give that extra $10 instead of the extra pizza? What are you able to do? And I find that as a difficult call to myself, because I'm able to do more than I'm doing, but I don't want to be crushed by the oppression of having to do everything for every social ill. Your second question is, I think, a tougher one. At Sojourners, we like to say that it can't be, actually we don't say this at Sojourners, some people say the oppression Olympics. I'm really not a fan of that phrase, but I get what the point is. It can't be really a listing of what's most important. So when we say, oh, creation care for all creation, maybe that's something that covers it, right? Because if you look at your sister or brother who's in pain, that's part of God's creation, but so is making sure that coal plants are not reinvigorated in a community that's primarily non-upper class Caucasian. So you could say care for all of God's creation. When you have international aid agencies looking at the United States border in a way that we might have looked at a border between, other countries in the past, that's a red alert. As we know, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. I'm hearing a lot of rhyming as a historian, and so I want to pay attention to that rhyming. So you'd say care for all God's creation, and to me that includes LGBTQIA, that includes the way that we build a country on genocide and race, and need to still attend to that. Reparations, as we need to think about that. So care for the creation in all its ways might be the easiest way to frame it, but it's hard.
One of the other things that stood out to me in this morning's program was Reverend Jackie Lewis really calling on us to also see those who are not seen in our midst, specifically those people with disabilities or different abilities, and providing access and inclusion. I'm wondering if you might even have any thoughts on that and the direction the Goose is going in terms of access and inclusion.
I think ableism is another thing that 10 years from now we'll be saying, how are we missing all this? Embodiment, corporeal reality, human finitude, these are not things we like to think about. The royal we, as it were. So I think, in short, we're on the beginnings, unfortunately the beginnings of ableist movement. A language around it is important. And I think it's gonna come about for a lot of reasons. Demographically, baby boomers are aging. Second is we are coming alive to all of God's creation. Certainly, I think when I was growing up in the 70s, there's a norm. Of course, the norm was cisgendered, heterosexual, white male, all this kind of stuff. Middle class, educated, and anything off the norm was aberrant. Thankfully, hopefully, we're coming into an understanding of not just the Rainbow Coalition concept, but appreciating this rich. God's creation is so rich, and it includes people who have different abilities. So I feel like it's just the beginning. I'm just at the beginning of that journey. As for Wild Goose, I would say that there's the good and then the challenge. The good is, as I look around and I adjust my kind of normative eyes from the 70s, I see an incredible array of people who I was really taught in the 70s to say, oh, there's something wrong with you, something wrong there, oh, something bad's happening there. To say, I wonder what's happening there. Well, that's fascinating. That's God's creation. What I mean by that is Wild Goose, I feel, is a place where you say, oh my goodness, I love you because you're God's creation, not, oh my heavens, I see 17 things, that are not the norm. The challenge part of the Wild Goose is we have limitations of the human earth and this particular campground that we need to continue to attend to. So I would say it's got a couple of steps. Listen to the people who come to the Goose who are otherly abled, and what can we do about that? Sure. The second is, let's be a little forecastive. What can we do? Just 3 or 4 things. Height of a stage, ramp abilities for things. And then think about different mental ability piece as well. One of the things that I kind of mourn about myself is I was trained to always operate at a graduate student level 500 course. That's not necessary. That's a kind of, I would say, very limiting language. It's good to know Aramaic. However, you might want to spread out to something else, to use a metaphor, use other languages. So a lot of room for growth for me personally, for the movement, and for Wild Goose as well. But some signs of hope. I've never been to a place that kind of seems to welcome as many types of people as possible.
Great.